Alright, wrap-up time for Blue Black Mill in Modern. And this one was really interesting. To me, this one is a tale of the matchups. We played 4 different matches. 2 of them I felt like we pretty much couldn't lose. Against the Titan, Valika, Scapeshift, whatever deck. They actually shuffled their library back in at one point, and we still killed them. So those matchups were insanely good. On the other hand, in the other 2 matchups, I felt like we literally had no shot at winning. Like, almost no matter what we did, we would not win. And that's forgivable against a deck like 8-Rack. 8-Rack isn't a major player in Modern. You can't have good matchups against everything in Modern. The format is wide enough and has enough powerful cards that you're not going to beat everything. So if Blue Black Mill can't beat 8-Rack, whatever, no big deal. Maybe 1 out of every 100 decks at a tournament is going to be playing that. What is troubling is the fact that I felt like we were a huge underdog against Infect. And I was just looking at the Modern Metagame page over on MTG Goldfish, and Infect is right now the #1 deck in the Modern Meta, tied with Jund for the most played deck. So it's going to be really hard to have sustained tournament success if you are a, I don't know, 10%, 15% to beat Infect. Like, I literally do not know how we can beat Infect. Our opponent was actually playing a rather inefficient build with Birds of Paradise over Noble Hierarchs, and we still weren't even close to winning. The only card we have in the entire deck that matters is Ensnaring Bridge, and Ensnaring Bridge doesn't even matter all the time. Like, yeah, it's good in some cases, but they can still beat us even through a bridge, and we have to be completely empty-handed because all their creatures are so small, so we can just attack and then pump them up, and we're not going to stop the Hierarch from attacking, so even through bridge, they can send pump spells at a Hierarch and win that way because it has 0 power. So I think we were good at what we do, and that's milling our opponent out. Manic Scribe is actually way better than I thought. I was looking at it as a mill 3 that would sometimes be activated, but it seemed like we can get Delirium rather consistently, and then it's mill 6 almost right away because you mill 3 when it enters and mills 3 more on your opponent's upkeep. So you get those 6 cards right away, and 6 cards for 2 mana along with a body that can block or at least chump block is actually a pretty reasonable mill card. So I was impressed by Manic Scribe and how good it actually was. The other thing that really stuck out is just the complete lack of instant speed removal. That's part of the reason we have no shot against Infect. Even after sideboarding, we have Profane Memento, which is good if you're playing Zoo or some like creature-based aggro deck. Pretty solid. Leylines of Void Extirpates, necessary cards in mill to deal with graveyard strategies. Set Adrift is actually pretty sweet, but it's sorcery speed. So, yeah, we just literally have nothing to deal with an Inkmoth Nexus at instant speed or a Edit Agent. The other matchup that I don't know how we ever win would be straight up Burn. I think we're just like a less efficient Burn deck, and our cards that gain us life, Profane Memento and Crypt Incursion, aren't really good in that matchup because our opponent doesn't have many creatures. On the other hand, there's some matchups that are really good. Valakut strategies, I think we would do pretty well against mid-rangey, like Jund strategies, any mid-range creature strategies. I think we would do decent against the Jeskai Nahiri deck because we can exile the Emrakul and that's their main win condition, and then we can kind of win at our leisure. So I think the deck is super powerful and super good in specific matchups, but then it is just as bad in other matchups. And unfortunately, some of those matchups are actually major parts of Modern at the moment. So my guess would be that this deck, why it ended up on Instant Deck Tech is it was played by someone at GPLA who went like 8-1 or 8-0-1 on day 1, and then faded off on day 2. So I'm guessing that's a case where the pilot hit the good matchups on day 1, and if you hit everyone playing Jeskai Nahiri and Scapeshift and so forth, you could easily go 8-1 with this deck. No problem. I would expect that to happen. But then, if you run into a bunch of Infect and Burn and so forth on day 2, Tron to some extent, also seems like a bad matchup, then you're going to fall apart because you just don't have answers to those cards and don't have things that really matter. So, I don't know. I have a hard time imagining this being a Tier 1 deck just because it has not just bad matchups, but horrible matchups, unwinnable, completely, totally trash matchups against 2 of the top 5 decks in the format, being Burn and Infect, and I'm not even sure it has super awesome matchups against Tron, which is another one of the big decks. So it seems like If you get the right matchups, you could win a tournament with this deck. If everyone's playing the good matchups in your local meta, by all means play this deck. But if you're expecting Infect, Burn, and so forth, I don't know how you ever win with this deck, and I don't even know if there's a solution to be found. The only thing I think of is tossing some Dismembers somewhere in the 75, some sort of instant speed removal spell, so you don't just auto-scoop to a Blighted Agent or something. Some little out to that. And maybe get rid of the Jace's Phantasm. Like, that could be more removal. You could play Damnations or Dismembers and be a more controlling build. Also, you could play some discard, some Thought Seizes or something, which might be good as well. So I would consider cutting Jace's Phantasm and using that slot for something to improve the horrible matchups. Whether or not that's enough to make those matchups from horrible to slightly less horrible and makes the deck playable, I'm not sure. But I think it's worth a shot, so that's where I'd start. Anyway, thanks for watching this week's Much Abrew About Nothing. Make sure to vote for next week's decks with the instant deck text by liking, subscribing, commenting, whatever you can do to support your deck. Anyway, appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed Blue Black Mill in Modern, Much Abrew About Nothing, and I will talk to you soon.